Very live.
Good morning. We are in Senate Judiciary. It's March 17th. We are starting to take up House bills now. And starting off with H 541, and we have Ledge Counsel here to provide a walk through.
Thank you very much, Justice Chair. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. And yes, you have a bill in front of you, H 541, that would like to interference with voters and election officials. And this will look somewhat familiar, just having gone through the Voting Rights Act, that is S-298 last week. And I can just briefly describe this as a bill that kind of somewhat similar to two provisions in the election appearance duty creates statutory sections S-298 and kind of just combines two of them. So you will see contemplated conduct that will either interfere with the operations of election officials or voter rights themselves. So I should just additionally note that Section 1 will kind of eliminate what will become redundant language, and it's a little kind of wonky anyways. That 1972 subsection B of 100% is not quite editorialized there. But of substance, you'll find in Section 2 is created in 17 VSA, Section 1975, to be titled Interference with Voters and Election Officials. And this will be slotted into Title 17, where you have other election laws, specifically chapter on offenses against the purity of elections. That is chapter 55. So here we have subsection A in line 19 reading, no person shall intentionally or recklessly intimidate, threaten, coerce, or attempt to intimidate, threaten, or coerce one, any other person for the purpose of A, obstructing the right of the other person to vote or to vote as the other person may choose, or B, causing the other person to vote for or not to vote for any candidate for public office or public question election. Or read the language opinion. No person shall intentionally or recklessly intimidate, threaten, force, or attempt to intimidate, threaten, force. 2, a public servant, an election official, or a public employee for the purpose of obstructing the administration of election. Then we move on to our penalties. We have a person who violates subsection A. This section shall be imprisoned not more than 2 years or fined not more than $2,000 for full. And I should just make some other quick notes that the mens rea is on line 19. There we have intentionally or recklessly. And recklessly is the bare minimum that the U.S. Supreme Court has held up in criminal threatening kind of scenarios. And it is Colorado v. Counterman that came out in 2023. And so this is provides for either potentially or reckless. And then also I should note that the penalties will match what's in our current criminal section under criminal threatening, Title 13. That's 13 VSA 1702, which does have some election provisions in it. They are essentially enhancements to an underlying general criminal threatening provisions and subsection A of that. And that's it for now. If you have any questions now, I just got to rattle off very quickly. So happy to drill down.
I think you briefly mentioned it, and I have 298 in front of me here as well. And I had draft 3.1, which I believe is the one that got passed.
Yes.
2023, the mens rea in 541 is intentionally or recklessly.
Yes.
In 2023, it's intentionally. And so I'm kind of confused as to whether we're creating a redundancy here, because it looks like what's in 541. I haven't looked at it too closely yet, but it looks like there are some redundancies there. And I was wondering if you could dive a bit deeper into what if we're replicating anything.
Sure. I can state that these bills were developed independently of each other, not really with each other's existence necessarily in mind. Let's see, the House Judiciary Committee took testimony and deliberated on 541 before Senate Government Operations Committee picked up S 298 for consideration. So that I think is just helpful context to know. But when we kind of compare them, let's see. So we have in S 298, we have the 4 different election interference provisions generally. So you have 2022, that's intimidation of election officers. So some of that is captured here. We have intimidation of voters. Some of that is captured here. And then we have, I would say, depending on the facts, we could somewhat overlap with communication of false information to eligible voters. Okay. Okay. And all of the crimes described in S 298, the boundary of that is intentionally, whereas contrasting with 541, there's kind of a either or, it can be intentionally or recklessly, which is lower. So it actually is a lower burden that a prosecutor would have to show, essentially, for any conduct that's described here as in the mental state of the person alleged to have committed the conduct, what were they thinking at that time. Let's see, further contrasting that, the actual penalties are the same. So it's not more than 2 years or a fine not more than $2,000. Those are identical. And it's a range. For mirror was an enhanced section of 1702, subsection E and F. And let's see here. But yeah, I would kind of summarize what one of my initial comments was saying. It's like think of it as kind of gathering some of the sections in 298 and essentially compressing them into one statute here. So there would be much of the conduct contemplated is the same.
And but yeah, in 298, we've added the private right of action.
Correct. Yes, that does not appear in H 501. There's no civil conduct here.
I guess just a curiosity question about section 1, something that I didn't know. So showing somebody else your ballot, let's say a young person goes to vote for the first time with their family, they walk out of the little booths, the young person shows their ballot, look, this is who I voted for. That person can be charged $1,000 for doing that.
Strictly speaking, yes. Let me just see if there's.
And that's existing laws.
That is existing law, and there's an interesting history. That's essentially an anti-bribery provision. There's similar laws in different states that were brought about at the same time, having to do with trying to counteract the buying of votes. So one of the ways to prove that the person is satisfied with this money's exchanged, the person comes out and the buyer of the vote would say, prove to me you did it. How would I otherwise? So they show the ballot. That I can't attest to how long that happens in practice, but that was the kind of reason behind this type of statute. That happened with the exactly what it was. And looks like I don't know off the top of my head.
So curiosity. Any other questions?
So I guess I'm imagining that as we move forward with both bills, there would be an opportunity at some point to harmonize what we're doing in a conference committee or something like that, where you could agree with the House chair that this is duplicative, and so we're gonna transport this provision in, so everything's in one bill that we want, and then the other one can fall by the wayside. Because otherwise, I think we're taking it to the government to decide how to, you know, deal with the fact that they cover the same thing.
Yeah.
And it seems to me the fact that one has a private right of action would likely mean that one would get vetoed and the other one would go through. So if we're committed to that, it's probably a good idea to have a plan about how the bills ultimately become one.
Yeah, my initial thought was just, since section 2 is what appears to be duplicative, just removing section 2 and keeping what we have in 298 as it is, and then passing just section 1 just to clarify that language. So that's something I'll talk to Representative Malone about. Any other questions? Yeah. All right, thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. So, committee, we are going into H5 at around 11. I think Michelle, she may be a few minutes late, but we can take a 5-minute break and come back around 11. Let's go live.